Welcome everybody, Tuesday Acres here. So today I'm going to be going over a fairly common question. Should you or should you not buy a used boiler? Stick around to the end for my final opinion on that, but today's video is going to be a little bit different because I wasn't actually making videos when I did the repair on this, but I took a ton of photos, so I'm going to do kind of like a slideshow voiceover thing and show you what I had to go through to get this thing usable. It was a lot of work, I'm not gonna lie. There was a lot of metal work, a lot of physical work, a lot of frustrating work. But with that said, we'll get right into the video. Here we go. So when I first got this thing, it was kind of on a whim. I wasn't really looking to get a boiler yet. I knew I needed a boiler about a year later, but it was just too good of a deal. I was at an auction and this thing was sitting there and I ended up getting it for 1,550 bucks. It's the biggest model that Wood Boiler makes. And it probably had a foot and a half, maybe more, of ash in the bottom of it, and the underside of it was all smashed up. The exterior was all beat to heck, bent all over the place. I knew it had been not treated very well and handled roughly during movement. You can see in this picture here at the bottom, the sheet metal on the bottom side is all mangled up, and you'll get better shots of that here in the next couple slides. But what I was really worried about was that the water jacket on the bottom side was smashed in, because it looked like somebody had tried to pick it up with a fork truck just by sliding it right underneath. And I'm certain that is what happened, but I figured that was the damage, and that really didn't turn out to be anything real. What ended up being the biggest problem was the top. So we'll get to that here in the next few slides. This next slide here, you can see again that the sheet metal on the underside was all bent up. All the framework on the outside to hold the sheet metal in place was all bent to crap. On the next slide here, this is just a photo of the backside. I bagged up all the fans and all the electrical stuff just to make sure nothing got rained on. Initially it was all black. You'll see later on I changed all of that. Again, the bottom is mangled out, but the more I opened it up, the more I noticed that the water jacket was really rusted on the top backside. Here in the next slide, a couple slides, you're going to see that really well and what the major issue was. And honestly, the purpose of this slide, because when I looked to figure out how to fix this, there isn't really anything on YouTube that directly addresses this issue. Again, just more rust, more mangled steel. Around the front here, again, just more plastic. This was all just the tear down process to figure out what we were looking at and what kind of mess I was getting myself into. Now this here is what really scared me when I got it opened up. Loads of rust scale, and even in this photo you can't really see the major damage. Now we're starting to see the major damage, and I did figure out what the problem is. Here, this next slide right here, obviously that's a problem, right? So the water jacket had completely rotted away around the chimney, which, come to find out, this seems to be a fairly, I don't want to say normal, but common issue. And the problem that, at least what I think happened, is that from the factory, they don't bother to put a rain guard around the chimney, or a rain collar, rather, around the chimney. So they put a bead of silicone between the chimney and the roof steel, the ridge cap and the roof steel. And it's like, that stuff just wears out over time, and then you get the water mixed with creosote dripping down into and on top of the boiler, where the boiler jacket or the water jacket meets the chimney, and this is the end result. Okay, so I had a choice to make. Do I spend time and money to fix it, or time and money and energy and all that, a lot more money for that matter, to get another one? So I jumped into it and fixing it. And I tipped it over on its face. That was a process there. I ended up using my neighbor's backhoe to do that because the thing is just too darn heavy. I tried with my tractor and there was just no way. Started to tip my tractor, and even using the backhoe, it wanted to, once the boiler got past the halfway mark, it wants to fall a little bit faster. And anyway, huge pain in the butt, but it worked. And then I finished stripping the outside materials, and I think they're called steel studs and steel purlins, but stripped all that, and then I cut that whole chunk that you see cut out there. I squared it up as best as possible. I took a lot of measurements, took my time, marked everything to make it as even, up and down, left and right, to make the reassembly process and fitment go as smooth as possible. It's still a lot of work, but it did help to get it as square as possible. But come to find out, apparently they make little like rings, like weld-on rings to go right over the base chimney pipe to just weld right in place. However, I actually cut it back all the way till there wasn't any more rot in the water jacket. That's why this square hole cutout is so big. This next series of photos is just the inside of the boiler, and you got to remember we're looking at it on end, so you're actually looking at a top-down view of the back of the boiler. It's like in this photo here, you see where the chimney comes out of the firebox, and then there's about a foot gap between the back of the firebox and the back of the water jacket. And there was so much rust scale inside of this thing. It took a long time to get it cleaned out. I made scrapers and, scrapers on end of sticks and rods, and I got in there with a shop vac and just literally days of cleaning the inside of this thing out to get as much of it out as possible. Outside of this, the rust scale, there wasn't really any damage on the inside. I found a couple little pop marks, rust divot marks that were, at least an 1/8 inch deep through 1/4 inch material, right next to the chimney and the water jacket where I opened it up. And those I just filled in with a little bit of MIG wire, weld spots. But the bulk of the inside was just a matter of cleaning. Now there was a layer of sludge that I don't have a photo of because you can't see it, but between the bottom of the firebox and the bottom of the water jacket, that it took me days of, spray. I actually even poured some sulfuric acid in there and let it sit for about an hour. Not sulfuric acid, muriatic acid, that a couple gallons of that with about 10 gallons of water, and let it sit in the bottom to break loose all the sludge. And then, did a full water rinse and had to do multiple hours worth of spraying with 2 hoses down each side of the inside of the water jacket, in between the firebox and the water jacket, with the rear drain plug popped, and just, spraying. And then I actually used a long chunk of 1/4 inch wire and put that in the drain plug or the drain hole in the back and scraping in between. And I kept breaking out more and more sludge. But, after 2 days of that, I finally got the inside completely cleaned out. I did all of that before I welded the top back on, just because I had pretty easy access while I was, while I had the big hole cut out of the top of it. So anyway, through all these photos, all you've seen so far is just before I did all the work. And unfortunately, I don't really have a whole lot of footage. I don't think I have any footage of what it looked like after I cleaned it all out. But all the rust scale that you see in these photos was gone. In this particular photo, you can see the water level sensor. I actually pulled that out just to verify, and I did a continuity check on it, and it worked just fine. And I did that with everything on this whole thing as I went along, checking, the fans and the solenoids, the water level sensor, the water temperature sensor. So anyway, it was really, really rough. You could tell it had been sitting and neglected for a long time. And I wasn't even really sure that all of this was going to be worthwhile in the end. So here we are, back to the actual work part of it. This is an adapter here that goes on the the firebox chimney pipe to the actual double wall chimney pipe, and it was trash. I got rid of that. The inside of the firebox looked, other than some creosote, looked fantastic. Like, I scraped and cleaned the entire inside of the firebox, and it looked fabulous. And like no divots, no rust pothole, nothing. It was fantastic. This part here to grind away the weld that the factory had put on between the firebox chimney pipe and the water jacket, that took a long time. My arms were jello by the time I got done grinding that thing clean and preparing for the new piece of metal, which we're getting to here shortly. Again, just a photo that grinding and grinding and grinding. There was a huge, probably almost a half-inch tall by half-inch thick weld all the way around. That the sheet metal for the water jacket had already disappeared via rust, but this weld ridge here just took forever to get rid of. But as you can see here, little by little, got her ground down to smooth again. Same here. And this is my new chunk of steel. So I had actually made a template out of just some cardboard and laid it across that cut opening so that I could get a profile of the arc. The cutout in the actual water jacket, I just laid a flat piece of cardboard, on edge inside that cut so I could trace out the arc. I made a template for the arc. Then I took my chunk of 1/4-inch plate steel here that you're looking at to a local metal shop or a fab shop, and they put it through their slip roller. And it took about 15 minutes going back and forth through the slip roller until it matched the template that I brought them. And very reasonably priced. It was only like $30-$40 for them to run it through the slip roller for 15 minutes, and boom, had the right arc to my chunk of steel, and I brought it home. And what you see here is that little pink string with the magnet. I had measured out where the hole needed to be and centered it out, put the magnet with the string on there, and used a plasma cutter with that string to get the perfect circle there. And from there, it's just a matter of grinding. I spent the next couple of days doing fitment. I wanted a flush fitment here, so literally I welded these 2 tabs that you see on it just so I could hold on to it. But now the whole unit's back upright, and it was at least 24 trips up and down a ladder, carrying a 50-plus pound chunk of steel up and down and fitting it over top and checking where it needed to be ground down. And it's certainly not exact, but I got it exact eventually. In this photo here, you can see I got a couple magnets holding it in place, which it did work, but it was honestly just more frustrating than anything. I ended up welding on some tabs on the outsides of the plate steel, the replacement steel. That's coming up here in the next couple photos, I think. But welded some tabs on. Yeah, there you go. So got these tabs on here to keep it from falling in, because that sucks. That did happen, and I had to wiggle it back out of there. But this was basically right before I was ready to start welding. I had taken it. Actually, there's some tack welds on there already. I literally, like I said, at least 24 trips up and down a ladder, take it back down, go and grind the edges so that I got a perfect fitment all the way around. You can see the arc worked out well. Everything, same thing with the hole for the chimney. That took a little bit of grinding to make sure all that fit out well. Once all of this was in place, it was just a matter of welding, and I spent the next day or so throwing down beads. I started off with a 60-11 to get good penetration, and then from there I threw several passes of 60-13. I was having some spots where I just kept getting porous welds, and I actually broke out the MIG welder to make sure I got good solid welds in a couple places. And I mean, pass after pass after pass. There's probably no less than 5 or 6 passes all the way around this thing, and probably at least 6 around the chimney. And everything you see other than the actual chimney pipe there, the whole tank and the firebox and the replacement material I put in there is all 1/4-inch plate steel. So it's pretty stout. It can handle quite a bit of heat. And I'm by no means a professional welder, obviously, but honestly, I think it turned out friggin' great. Looking at these welds, there's no holes. And then I finally, after I got it completely welded up and cleaned out and, ready to put back together, before I did that, before I actually put everything back together, I went ahead and filled it up. This thing holds 497 gallons, something like that, and I just let a hose go. Took many, many hours, but got it completely filled up right to the brim where it was spilling out the overflow tube, and let it sit there for a full day. checked the water jacket on the inside, checked underneath of it, and I couldn't find one drop anywhere. So it all worked out just fine. On my second, right as of the production of this video, it's been in use now for two. This is the second season, and now I haven't peeled the top back open to see what it looks like, but I doubt there's any change to it, and you'll see why here in just a second. Now, I did go through before all of this and wire wheel the entire water jacket, the entire front, the entire back, the entire sides, because you remember back in those first couple photos, like the one we're looking at here, underneath the new steel is the old steel, and you see it's not all rusted over anymore. Spent a day or two out there with a wire wheel, big grinder and wire wheel to clean it all up. And it did make quite a difference. But, you know, to me it was worth it. I spent $1,500 on this, another $1,550 on the actual unit, and then another $2,000, or I'm sorry, not $2,000, maybe $1,000 on extra parts. One of the fans was bad. I bought a kit that came with a new door seal and some silicone and some just random stuff. So I think it was totally worth it. Basically $2,000, $2,500 plus my time for a $17,000 unit. I'll take it. So here in this photo, I went through, and after all the welding was done, the water checks were done, I wire wheeled the whole thing one more time, and then acetone washed, just with a rag, but cleaned up the entire exterior of the water jacket with acetone wipe down. And then I did 2 full coats of a paint that I had never heard of before, but it's called POR, and it stands for paint over rust, but that's the brand, POR 15. So I did 2 full coats of POR 15, but this is the high temp. Honestly, I don't think it needs it. I mean, most paint can handle a couple hundred degrees, and this water jacket should never really get any higher than, say, 200, 205. So regular POR probably would have worked fine. I ended up just spending the extra 30, 40, 50 bucks, whatever it was, for a gallon of POR 15 high temp. But again, one single gallon is almost $200. But I didn't want to ever touch it again. So I think this will work. And there was no paint, no nothing from the factory, which makes me wonder. They didn't put any sealant on the double wall chimney pipe. They didn't put so all they put on it was sealant. They didn't put a rain collar, and then the tank isn't painted. It's almost like they come from the factory, made to fail, made to run into these problems, so it only has a lifespan of 10, 15 years. This unit was apparently made in 2008. I picked it up in 2019, I think it was 2019. Got it fixed up and running by 2020. But if it had a rain collar and properly sealed and properly painted, none of this exterior rust would have been on here. So it just makes you wonder. You're paying $17,000 for a unit that's only going to last you 5-10 years because they didn't want to put a couple $100 worth of paint on it and a $10 rain collar. It really makes me wonder. Anyway, after the paint dried, everything looked absolutely fabulous, and I started doing the reconstruction of the exterior. So I started with the front and the back, getting the front and the back insulated, and I just bought brand new off the shelf, I think it was 23-inch wide by 25-foot rolls of the R19, and it fit perfectly. I had to trim obviously here and there, but as far as R19 thickness, it fit underneath all of the new sheet metal on the outside. And I actually had a bunch of my barn steel. You see the barn in the back? That barn steel is the exact stuff. I had remnants left over. I had like 15 10-foot sheets left over that were supposed to go on the lean-to, and I didn't use them. So I used them here, and I used the busted up ones that came off the boiler, the original ones, as templates and measurements. I just took the best measurements I could get out of the really nasty ones, cut out new pieces, and started getting her all put back together. These side rails here, going the vertical, they're called steel studs. I didn't know what they were, even where to find them, but they're just steel studs. I was able to get a stack of them from local box store and replaced the old ones that were all mangled. And they worked great. You know, you got to tack weld them in place, but they worked just great. So we'll keep moving on here. And the reason why I went with that R19 is it comes in 25-foot rolls. And for my water jacket, a full 25-foot roll made it around the water jacket where I could start on the top of one side, wrap around, underneath, back up and over the top. And I have like a 6 to 8 foot overlap on the top. You know, the top is where you definitely want the most insulation. And they worked out perfect. You know, I had the wife out there helping me feed it up underneath while I pull it around and everything, cut out where the chimney and that hoist loop are up top and the water vent or the overflow tube, and it worked absolutely amazing. Perfect size. Obviously, you can get other sizes if you need that, but for my situation, it worked out great. Little by little, you know, back and forth, up and down. Got her all pieced back together little by little, and it's a little fluffy there on the sides. You see it sticking out past the studs, but it's insulation. It'll smash down, and it did just fine. I did pack in the bottom, so I got the bottom steel in first before I did the sides, and that's coming up here. You know, it's kind of a pain in the butt. You see the cardboard, you know, not a whole lot of space under there, but I crawled up under there and, you know, got my sheet metal in place and zipped in all my screws, and there we go. So once the bottom one was in place, you can see I got the corners of the insulation installed on the bottom. I wanted basically the entire cavity within the walls of the sheet metal to be filled in with insulation, and it worked. Got the sides put on, and there it is. You know, doors are put back on, new seals. In this photo, you can see I got the new chimney, the double wall stainless steel chimney with the rain collar this time, and that's got sealant on it, and matches the barn. It's like my own little mini barn. Here we are again, just a front view of it, and I got the chains down there. You see, that's what I used to drag it into place with the tractor. But yeah, it worked out really well, and after it was all put back together, I filled it up one more time just to double check everything, and everything held. No problems, no leaks, and here we are about a year and a half later. Same story, really. Well, I hope you got something out of that. I've never set up a video like that before. Hopefully it helps somebody out. But moving on to, you know, my personal opinion. Look, there's a lot of things that go into doing something like what I just did that, I mean, I'm not saying anybody can't do it, but it does take a lot of tools, a lot of practice, a lot of patience. You know, I've been working on stuff like this for a long time, but you got to have the will to push through it, you know, and I literally saved myself, you know, because I did the whole install as well. And I could do another video similar to that with, you know, trenching and all that stuff. So throw that down in the comments if you do want to see that. But, you know, I've been welding. I had all the stuff on hand to do it. I even had my own 1/4-inch plate steel. So I saved myself well over $15,000 doing it all myself. So, you know, is it worth it for me? Absolutely. Is it worth it for somebody who's going to have to buy a welder, who's going to have to buy steel, who doesn't have a place to work on stuff like that, who doesn't have a tractor? You know, that's when you get into that, well, you know, by the time you do learn all that stuff and put the time into it and the money into it, it's not worth it anymore. So now if that's stuff you want to get into anyway, I would highly encourage it. However, you know, if you're just looking to have something to heat and you buy your own wood, you have somebody install everything, then this kind of project probably isn't for you. But, you know, for me, it worked out absolutely amazing. Good timing. I wasn't even ready for the boiler yet when I got it. So it sat here in the yard for almost a year before I even looked at it. I had no clue how bad it was for almost a year until I started digging into it when I was ready. But anyway, hey, thanks for watching. If you got anything out of this, I'd appreciate a like down, you know, hit that like button, and appreciate, you know, subscribing as well. Thanks a bunch for watching. Y'all have a great day, and we'll catch you on the next video.